From the Homestead Studios in Santa Clarita, California, it's just the Tip-Sters with Melissa Morgan.
Carry on, my wayward son.
If you've got a tip for Melissa, what you saw on the news that jogged your memory, an unsolved murder that you just know you can solve, how to tell your best friend that no, you really don't want to earn extra hundreds in your spare time by selling protein shakes for cats, anything, tell us about it by calling the Tip-Ster hotline at 832-TIPSTER. That's 832-847-7837, or send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And now here's your host. She's always carried the torch of justice and only set the drapes on fire with it that one time, Melissa Morgan.
More cowbell. Yeah, you set the drapes on fire one time and suddenly you're an arsonist.
Well, I didn't call you an arsonist.
Not out loud.
The fire guy.
It was implied.
Kind of.
I felt it.
Sort of.
Yeah, if you want to talk true evil, multi-level marketing.
Yes.
True evil.
Yeah.
Just in the heart, like the heart of darkness is LuLaRoe and
oh, God.
other bullshittery.
Yes.
So, yeah, if I don't care how much you love your friend and how much you love your cat, they don't need protein shakes, and you don't need to build an upline, downline.
Down the pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't with the multi levels, please.
Well, I remember one time, and it was so hard too. Somebody at work who I never would have imagined. You know, and I think maybe this is always the case. It's somebody you never imagined, somebody you really know, and you think you know, approaches you one day. Hey, I got this great thing that I'm doing, and we're having a meeting next Thursday, and you can make all this money, and you just need to work for me, and I'm working for somebody else, and they're working for somebody.
This is a great side hustle.
Oh my God!
Selling protein shakes for your cat. Because they need protein. They need to build muscle and work out on Venice Beach. Your cat does. Yeah, please don't with the multi-level marketing. Please don't. And look, I'm as big of a offender as anyone. Not that I'm a multi-level marketer. Thank the good sweet Lord. I'm a lot of bad things, but I'm not that. But I like to support my friends, and I've bought things that were the most useless, like the most wonderful thing about the item that arrived was just the packaging, because the rest of it was just bullshit. And I have more pairs of leggings and shit than I'll know what to do with. And I can't anymore. I run now from the multi-level marketing.
And isn't it always way more expensive than the stuff you can just buy
it depends.
elsewhere?
Probably. But again, what I am suckered into is supporting my friends. And I'm like, and some of the things, don't get me wrong, there are some things that people sell that are quality products. I have not run into those yet. But I know they're out there. And I love, skin, and I mean, not other people's. They can have their own. Might try to love my own skin, and I love makeup and all that girly shit. And I'm not paying thousands of dollars for your, magical, butthole cream or whatever. I'm not.
Wait, is there a magical butthole cream?
I made that up. Now I'm starting a business.
Yeah, I think
NBC.
That would probably do pretty well.
Melissa's magical butthole cream. Speaking of that, also don't bleach your anus. Girls, guys, it's not real. I have told the story in the past probably, but I used to go to a very well-known esthetician salon, and it became the place where you would go to get unusual, waxings. You could get vajazzling, etc. But I was...
Vajazzling?
Yeah. Where you wax most of the hair away, and then you put little sequins around it.
Oh.
Yeah, you didn't know about that. I'm glad, because that would mean you're looking at other vaginas. So I have never had the vajazzling, nor would I. And I like glitter and sparkle. Don't get me wrong, just not there. Not in that area.
Yeah, I mean the time and place.
Sure. So I was getting a service at said salon at one point, and the owner said, yeah, some documentary film crew from England called and said that they heard that we did anal bleaching. And the owner is a amazing, insane woman. And she's also a great businesswoman. And she's like, I, of course, said, well, yeah, because it didn't exist. And she, gathered a couple of her girls together and put together a video. And it was hilarious because what she did was put brown eyeshadow around one girl's butthole. And that was the before. And then just wiped the brown eyeshadow off and said, and this is 6 weeks later after anal bleaching.
I think I'm going to throw up a little bit.
Well, here's my favorite part. The next time I had an appointment, I got the girl who was the model. And she was an amazing girl. I don't think she still works there. But I said, look, the owner told me about the anal bleaching thing with the British film crew and how she kind of thought it up on the spur of the moment. She goes, oh, yeah, I was the volunteer. And I'm like, what? And she goes, so I'm on my hands and knees on a table and the owner's putting brown eyeshadow on my butt and taking pictures and my phone rings and it's my mom. And my mom says, what are you doing? And I said, you wouldn't believe me. So
okay, that story is worth this entire conversation.
A tub of anal bleach.
I was going to say, why are we having this conversation? And now I know.
Now you know. So don't believe everything that you see, read, hear, including things from me. I try very hard to remain truthful. I really do, and I hate when I make mistakes or get details wrong. But please know, I have the best of intentions. I'm doing the best I can. And that is what I hope you'll remember. And I have never gotten vajazzling or had my butthole bleached. And you shouldn't either. Your butthole's perfect, whatever color it is. And you don't put eyeshadow on it either, unless it's like hypoallergenic, because it's a very delicate area. The skin is very thin around there. Let's not talk about that anymore.
I just hear a feminist folk singer, every butthole is sacred.
Is perfect in its own way. Every butthole's perfect in its own way. It really is.
We gotta stop now.
Sorry, yeah.
That's just like,
can you hear all the listeners like click, 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 click? I'm going to go listen to some click, click.
Because I could just say, "Hey, Mom, I know this really great podcast. Here, let's listen to the. I'll turn you on to it. Let's listen.
Let's listen to the butthole bleaching." Yeah, it's true crime. Honest to God, it's not about butthole bleaching or multi-level marketing yet. The day is young. Who knows?
Oh, have I told you about Amway?
Yeah. Exactly. That's it. Totally. So I love this quote from Stephen King, and he said, it's from The Shining. Monsters are real, and ghosts are too. They live inside of us, and sometimes they win. That's a great quote from The Shining. And I know it's, probably, here's Johnny. It's probably, for someone who's mentally ill. But it's still a great quote that I think applies to so many things. And there are definitely a lot of monsters, and most true crime podcasts are in the business of trying to help and maybe uncover monsters or shine a light on a monster that can shrink down and become a much smaller thing if a light is shown on it. And I love a group mentality. I love a hive mind. I don't like that phrase when people use it on social media, but I get it. You want a group of people together to maybe shine a light on something, all their flashlights at the same time, or someone comes up with a thought or an idea that it didn't dawn on you. And it's really helpful to help see something in a different way. I think most cases are solved with help. I truly in my heart also believe most cases are solved with good old-fashioned shoe leather. I am thrilled to death with the advancements in technology and science and DNA. Thrilled to death we have those things. But unless you know what to do with those things, you're not going to solve anything. They're just going to be a database of someone's, spit, or it's going to be someone's report on a piece of paper that languishes in a box. So I am grateful when there's a group or when people hear things and report something that they thought they knew that maybe they didn't think was important and turns out to be very important. And that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with this update on the Randy Sellers case, because I got foisted into something before I knew what was happening that was awkward and uncomfortable, at some points scary, and I'm still not going to stop. I'm still not going to stop, even though I did get a little scared. And there's, as producer Mark said, there's a time and a place for everything, not just vajazzling, but for also looking at a case and maybe, taking a step back. And I know, again, cases that are solved by people that know what they're doing, and mostly good old-fashioned shoe leather. Personal relationships, getting someone to trust you and tell you something, those things are vitally important. In this case, I had to think about how to explain it and who to tell you to call, because I don't trust anyone anymore after this. So I grew up in Northern Kentucky, and somehow I spent the large part of my life not knowing about this case. I don't know how it escaped me, maybe because I didn't know him, a few years older than me. Maybe there was a lot of reasons maybe I didn't know, but it seems odd to me that I didn't, because it was such a small town. So in 1980, I was 15 and Randy Sellers was 17. And he went to the Kenton County Fair on August 16th of 1980, and he was going to turn 18 in about 3 weeks. He was driven there by a friend, so he didn't have a ride of his own. His parents were out of town, not really too far away, but they were gone for the evening, and he knew that they were going to be gone, which is an important piece of information for later on. He gets into a scuffle at the Kenton County Fair, and the police are called. The two police that show up to take him home instead of to sleep it off, which seems like it would be a thing to do, but maybe because he's 17. There are too many questions and absolutely no answers here, so hang on. The two police that show up in 1980 have a car with no screen in the back, and Randy is drunk and belligerent, and they are familiar with him. Please do not believe that he is able to bamboozle them into thinking he lives in a different place, or that these excuses that have come up are just completely ridiculous. I'll give them to you and you can hear them and you can judge for yourself. In my mind, nothing the police say that night makes any sense. Not one thing after they pick him up. So he takes a swing at one of the officers and hits him in the head. They wait for another car with a screen. So now there are 4 officers accompanying Randy supposedly home. He's in the back of the car with the screen, and the other 2 officers are in their car without the screen. So there are 4 officers escorting Randy home. 4. Now, you've taken a swing at one officer and hit them in the head. Do they want to do you any favors? By the way, you're known to them. You are, kind of a, juvenile who's had some issues. You're not really enrolled in a regular school anymore. You're going to half school, half work. He's not like a career felon, just a kid who's, a young boy stirring up shit. Big deal. It shouldn't be a big deal, but it's a small town and they know him. Their answer is that he asked to be dropped off a mile from his home so that his parents didn't know he was drunk. Wrong. He knew his parents weren't home. Another theory is that he hitchhiked after they dropped him off to go to where his mother was. Also probably wrong. I don't believe he had any interaction with the hitchhiker, a serial killer or not. I don't think that happened. So Randy is gone. Just gone. The officers say, hey, we let him off a mile from his house right here, right about the corner here of this country road near this large farm. He wanted to go home and didn't want his parents to know he was drunk. Okay. And probably would have gotten away with it, and they have, actually, if, his mother hadn't reported him missing the next day. And he is nowhere. Zero, nowhere. No one's seen him since that moment. Now, Occam's razor, sometimes the easiest theory is the correct one. Sometimes that's just it. I'm going to say most of the time that's just it. There are occasionally cases where a very odd, bizarre thing happens, i.e. a drifter serial killer is just wandering around a rural part of Kentucky, sees a drunk young man hitchhiking, picks him up, shoots him in the head, and, buries him not well in a park that he's never been found in.
And that's one of the screwy theories that's been thrown out there by, what's the name of the serial killer? I forget his name.
Donald Leroy Evans.
That's right.
So we'll get to that. I just don't think that, another theory. There's the Licking River. Not very big, not very deep. Randy was drunk walking home after the police let him off and slipped and fell into the Licking River. No, he didn't. I've learned enough over these last few years of hosting this podcast that very rarely does a body fall in the water and something isn't found. Something. And there was a 2-week search, including a dive team from another county who worked on this case. Even back in 1980, they employed everything at their disposal to try and find Randy. He wasn't in the fucking water. He didn't fall in the Licking River. That didn't happen. He didn't come near the Licking River because he never made it that far. He never made it anywhere where he could hitchhike and be found by a serial killer. He never made it anywhere. He never left those police officers. I'm just going to say it. If I'm proven wrong, I will apologize all over myself, but not right now. And I'll tell you why. In September of 2019, I went back to my hometown in Kentucky. Now, I covered Randy's case in February of 2019, and I was so happy to do so because, again, while I was unfamiliar with the case, 2 high school friends, unbeknownst to each other, messaged me within 2 weeks of each other. One lives in Texas, one lives in Kentucky. And they said, hey, have you ever thought about covering the Randy Sellers case? And I'm like, who? But by the time I get the second email, I'm like, all right, I'm going to take a look at this. So I take a look, and then I find out that it has been recently reopened twice. In 2006, and then again in 2016, 2017, I believe. It was handed off to a cold case detective in the Kenton County Police Department. We interviewed him in February of 2019. From my perspective, it went well. I was asked to submit questions. I did. There were only 3 that were unanswered, that they chose not to answer. But the answer to one of them came out naturally, organically in the interview, which one of the questions they redlined I was not allowed to ask was if the police officers had been given polygraph tests. And that question was answered organically in an answer by the officer I interviewed. So his answer was somewhat nebulous. It wasn't like, oh, they passed with flying colors, or, oh, it was inconclusive, or, oh, they failed. The answer was, I believe there was nothing in those tests that would lead them to warrant further investigation. That's a real... and
that's something straight out of a politician's mouth, man.
Yeah, that sounds very scripted and planted.
Yeah, it sounded. I remember at the time when we were doing this, when we were interviewing him, and he said that, it was. I thought, wow, because the rest of the interview, it seemed pretty organic.
It did.
That seemed like a canned thing that he tried.
The PR person told him to say.
Somebody told him to slip in there. Not maybe not. I mean,
no, I think you're right.
I thought at the time it sounded strange, but now, after everything that's happened, I think maybe, who knows?
I think you're right. I will also confess to you, I am remarkably naive. If someone says something to me, I take it pretty much at face value because I'm not a great liar. I really am not good at it. Not only do I not want to do it because it makes me sick trying to hide it, I'm just not good at it. I have 0 poker face. You can tell everything that's going on with me to the plus or to the minus by looking at my face. Am I right, producer Mark?
Yes, you are.
I've often said I'm filterless. As an adult, I'm trying to curb things that could be uncomfortable or painful to others. I'm not a total monster. I don't just blurt things out. I do try and couch things, with some whatever diplomacy I can muster up in myself. But you can tell, if you ask me a question, you can pretty much tell what the answer is going to be. And I'm not going to be able to fool you. into thinking something, because I'm not good at that. So I'm also not good at seeing or hearing other people say things and not believing it's true. If I ask them a question and they answer it, I like to believe that it's true. I mean, you can find out later in life, that maybe it wasn't true, but I don't believe the interview with the officer was untrue. I believe he believes everything he said. I'm not saying he's a sociopath like O.J. Simpson and he's now convinced himself he didn't kill Nicole and Ron. I'm saying everything he said, I believe he believes in, but I believe he's so wrong, so very wrong. And you don't want to sell your brothers down the line, even if it's brothers you never worked with, brothers that are several generations ahead of you. You don't want to say bad things about the people that you work with. You want that one of the things that struck me about the interview last February was when I said, "What's your favorite part of the job?" And he said the brotherhood. That pretty much sums it up. It's not the cool uniforms, the great car, the gun, the badge. He has a brotherhood, and the thought that his brothers may not all be as wonderful as he is sure would be shocking. But I'm so angry right now, and I've kept this in since September. So let's go back to September of 2019. I go to visit my lovely friends in Kentucky. I drive around, do a little snooping, because that's who I am, looking at places, properties where 3 of the 4 officers who arrested Randy are still alive. One of them passed away. And the one that passed away, Russell England, apparently, when someone in 2006 reopened the case, they thought they had a probable cause to dig up his yard, a large parcel of his very large property, a 90 by 60 area, because 2 inmates who could very well have been wrong, but maybe had, the right street but the wrong house, said that Randy and a car were buried on Russell England's property. I'm not sure Russell England had anything to do with this. I think 2 of the officers are, may know some information, one of them being dead now, or may not. But I believe 2 of the officers are very complicit in what the hell happened to Randy. I really do. And both of those officers are still alive. And I will tell you, I didn't think that. And I will tell you that all the messages I got on social media where people in this town are yelling and screaming, "We all know what happened to Randy. We all know that those 2 cops killed him. We all know this." I don't listen to those things because small town gossip is just that, small town gossip. And small town gossip has, convicted people who were completely innocent. I hate small town gossip, but I also can't get past sometimes where there's smoke, there's actually fire. It isn't just smoke. It isn't that someone's vaping. It's that there was a fucking fire. And I can't help but think there wasn't, there had to be a fire somewhere in Visalia or Morning View that night. So what happens is I come home after, I'm not solving a case because I'm not an investigator, but I was interested in what I saw, what I looked at, areas, etc. I am exhausted. I drop my bags and I hear my phone ping. And producer Mark's out of town on a business trip. And I hear my phone ping. And I pick it up and it's a man who's contacted me via social media and says, "I hear you have involvement in the Randy Sellers case," which I don't. I host a podcast. I don't work for law enforcement. And he said, "I have a story for you." And I thought, well, this ought to be good. Small town bullshit. We talked for quite a long time. And this man lives somewhere in the area, not exactly where Randy lives now, but he grew up there. He grew up on the farm, a large farm, on the corner of 2 major country roads. The corner happened to have been where the officers say that they let Randy out to walk home, about a mile from Randy's home. This man was very good friends with Randy's younger brother, Ty. Now, you might remember that 10 years to the day of Randy's disappearance, Ty took off his boots and jumped off of a bridge into the Licking River. because he wanted to be with his brother. And he had had a lot of mental health issues. And now Mr. and Mrs. Cotton, Randy and Ty's mother and stepfather, have lost both of their sons in very, very bad ways. You can say one son is presumed dead, but we know both sons are gone now. We really do know that. Randy isn't living in Florida or an island, and he hasn't, grown more facial hair and dyed his hair blonde. Randy never made it home on August 16th of 1980. He just did not. So this man tells me that he was 11 at the time that Randy was 17, and Ty was 11. They were friends, Randy's younger brother, Ty. And this man tells me that he hears his mother crying and about 1 a.m. And he gets up and he stands at the kitchen door and he hears his father consoling his mother and saying, "They killed that boy tonight and there was nothing I could do about it." Now, he doesn't know exactly what that means because he's 11, but 11 isn't 4. 11 isn't unable to understand consequences. 11 could be an age. It's a difficult age because you could be a very immature 11, or there are 11-year-olds that are like 40.
If I had heard something like that when I was 11, I would have called the police.
See, I know who you are, and that would have happened. You would have called the police at the age of 5. There's a picture of Mark on my desk, where he's so serious and he's 6 years old, and he goes, "I am 42 years old here." And that's the truth. There are some kids, and this man that spoke with me strikes me as a sensitive soul who was an advanced 11-year-old. He went to private school and then went back to public school, but he's a smart guy. He's not. I think at 11 he probably understood what the hell he heard. He did notice some things changed when he woke up the next morning. Randy is missing. There are reports on the news. His mother is going to Mr. and Mrs. Cotton's home quite often, bringing food, the things you do in the South, even though I hate to think of Kentucky as a South. It was neutral during the Civil War. I just wanted to bring that up again. But anyway, you do those things when you're from a small town and you take care of your own. And apparently this woman was very close with Mrs. Cotton and was devastated at the loss of Randy, even though she knew what her husband told her. So over the years, this man heard odd things. His father owned a very large farm. They had 100 head of hog. When he was a teenager helping his father on the farm, he said, "If you ever wanted to get rid of a body, feed it to the hogs. They eat anything." Things he told me disturbed me more than I can tell you. This man said that he and his father no longer speak because of some family issues. But he said, "You should call him and ask him." And I was like, "Me? Why would I do that? Why don't you let the police call him?" And he's like, "I've called the police. I've called them twice. And they really weren't interested in what I had to say."
That's important. That's when Melissa first told me what happened when I got back from my business trip, and she told me that's when the hair on the back of my neck started going up.
So he didn't, producer Mark is right. He didn't call them at the age of 11. He called them in his 20s and in his 30s. He called them twice and said, "Look, I can't get over the fact that my father knows more about this case than he said. Please talk to him. Please interview him. This is what he told me as a child." And they just didn't seem interested. I'm kind of dumb, and it didn't dawn on me they didn't seem interested because he's, implicating their department. I don't know that those men still worked there at the time, but maybe. I don't know. It just, what he told me disturbed me so much. And I was like, should I believe him? Is he insane? He sent me I really did think he was insane at first. But I think everyone's insane until I figure out what they're telling me is true, because you can't believe the information you get when you host a true crime podcast. I can't imagine what it's like if you're in law enforcement. You probably get tips on a daily basis as to who killed JFK and where, who's the murderer of John Benet Ramsey every minute of every day. I host a little true crime podcast we're trying to make bigger, and you can't believe the shit that I get. I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding? So, when he told me this, I questioned him to the best of my ability to see if he was mentally unstable. And I don't think he is. I thought, is this a vendetta against his father? And I thought, there's so many other ways he could get back at his dad. They haven't spoken in decades. Just because his dad may have overheard something, he implied that his father may have had something to do, with hiding Randy with his police friends. Apparently the police officers involved were very good friends with this man, and he had a very large farm, and during off hours they would help him on his farm and he would pay them. I don't, that could be true. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense, but I have no proof. I don't have time cards. I don't have, any of that stuff. So the more he tells me, the more I'm like, if he knows something, why wouldn't he have told the police what, And this man said he would never sell out his friends. And I thought, all right. So I sit on it for a while, and producer Mark comes home from his trip, and I tell him, actually, I contact someone in law enforcement first in my state, in California. And before I can get most of the story out, he said, hey girl, did you just swan dive into a hornet's nest? And I laughed and said, I think I did. And he said, you need to contact someone higher than that. And I was like, no, I'm gonna start it at the street level. I'm gonna start at the street level. So I tell producer Mark, I'm gonna call this man, and let's just see if he answers.
The father of the guy that called you.
The father of the man who contacted me. So I contact this man, same phone number he's had for many, many years. And he is a senior citizen, and he is sharp as a fucking tack. And he is a smooth talker and a ladies' man, just as his son said he would be. And I played up to that, and how can I help you, sweetheart? He bought in, but he's also smart, and said, are you a journalist? You with the newspaper? I was like, no, I'm just a girl who lived in Independence, Kentucky, and I was even a little too young to know Randy, but I have friends who knew him and wonder what happened, and, I'm just looking into this. And we talk a little bit, and he says, what I think happened? I think you're looking for a needle in a haystack. And I thought, well, I think that's very true. And he said, what I think happened is some small town cops put a beating on a kid, and it went too far. Now, at this point, I try not to swallow my own tongue. And I say, you know what? That seems to be the rumor. It seems to be what everyone around there thinks happened. And he said, they dug up Russell England's yard. And I said, yes, I do. I read that report, and they didn't find anything. And he said, they're not going to find anything. And I thought, well, that's an interesting statement.
Says the man who is friends with the cops, who owns a farm with hogs on it, and who has told his son in the past, if you want to get rid of a body, feed it to the hogs.
Yes, this is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's what I'm hearing from him. And he says, are you with law enforcement? And I was like, no, I'm telling you, I'm just a girl, grew up in Independence. I just wanted to know what happened to Randy. And he says, we know my son-in-law's in law enforcement. You might want to talk to him. And I say, great. What's his name? And his name is the officer who is handling Randy's case. And I'm not saying their names because you can find them. You can listen to the interview last February on this podcast. You can look up anything and find it. And I really try not to swallow my tongue. And I say, well, isn't that amazing? And he's catching on now, and he says, what's amazing about it? And I said, oh, that your son-in-law is in law enforcement. That's just really amazing. And he says, well, I have to go, darling. My other line's ringing. Yes, I'm sure it is. And we hung up, and I hyperventilated and talked to producer Mark, tried to figure out what to do. And I took the advice of the officer I spoke to who said, go up higher. Who's going to investigate the cops? The cops? And I didn't want to do this. I would never recommend doing this, but I didn't know where to go. And I did what he asked me to do, and I called the FBI. And somewhere I told producer Mark, if I precede him in death, he needs to put somewhere on my memorial, she made the FBI gasp in 2019.
Yeah, you did.
I did. So when you call the FBI, what you get is an admin person, and they won't give you their name, but they'll give you their badge number. And I have her badge number, and she was exceptional. And I wrote down every single detail, the time we started and the time we ended. And we had a 52-minute conversation because I kept trying to give her information. And she said, can you slow down? I'm about a sentence behind. And I said, if this call's being recorded, why are you typing it all out? And she goes, because I have to document everything. And I was like, all right, fine. So I tell her everything, and I get to the end, and I say, I call this gentleman, and because his son told me what statement he made in 1980, and he says his son-in-law's in law enforcement, and I give her the name, and she goes, and then she turns and says, oh my God, everyone came to my cubicle and wondered why I gasped. So I made the FBI gasp out loud with the story. And then I was told, they're going to call you. They're going to come and see you. Nothing. Not a word. No one contacted me. However, that's a little bit further down the road. I know that the officer was on vacation that week because I had spoken to him in Kentucky before I left. And he told me he was heading out for a week of vacation. So I knew I had a week.
Didn't you even take them donuts and coffee?
I did. When I was
wanted to talk to him, and you wanted to...
I did, and he was out serving warrants. I just wanted to, say, hey, thanks for that interview in February. If there's any other information on Randy, let me know. We can do a follow-up. That would be great. Because they have done thank you for bringing that up, producer Mark. They've done 2 digs with college students in forensics, with cadaver dogs from Lexington and Louisville that were brought up to northern Kentucky to dig around this Kincaid Lake Park where this serial killer said he left Randy, and that never happened. And at this point, they're looking for grommets from work boots or, metal tabs from jeans because there would be nothing left.
Let's face it, they were looking for snipes. I mean,
yes.
I mean, I'm sure now that I know everything that we know, I'm sure that the investigating officer was thrilled that these kids were out digging for snipes.
Well, I don't want to throw him under the bus because I don't.
All right.
Sorry. I know. I appreciate what you're saying and it makes sense, but I don't want to throw him under the bus because I believe that he has or had the best of intentions. I also believe that I don't think he's naive, but I think he may have been a patsy. I think they had to have known that this man said to his son what he said. And the fact that he is now that man's son-in-law and he's handed Randy's case, it could absolutely just be, oopsies, that happened. It's a small department. I don't think they have a huge cold case section. I think he's it because he mostly focuses on internet sex crimes. But it just seems a little odd that he would be the one handed Randy's case when that those higher up have to know it's a big unsolved case hanging over their head. The police were the people implicated. Occam's razor. They're the ones who probably disposed of Randy in whatever way they did. And what breaks my heart in half is that Mr. and Mrs. Cotton believe 1,000% in the police and believe 2,000% that Donald Leroy Evans killed their son. And you have to hold on to something. I can't imagine the pain of losing not only one son, but 2 for the same reason. One was killed and the other one can't take that his older brother was killed. I cannot imagine the pain that you would live with. And you would have to find some sort of life preserver. And if your life preserver is named Donald Leroy Evans, I don't blame you for a moment. But I don't think Donald Leroy Evans crossed paths with Randy Sellers ever. I just don't think it happened. And I don't know where Randy Sellers is. And I don't know if the people that are still alive will ever say. And we may not have anything of Randy left. I never would have considered hogs as an option. I didn't know that would have been anything that could have happened. It seems like something that only happens in the movies, but it could have happened. I don't know, and I don't know if anyone will ever say. But I waited a long time before talking about this because I wanted to give it some time and know if anything happened that could have changed my mind. And the officer called me when he got back from vacation and said, and I was angry. I picked up the phone and said, yeah, what do you want? I was so mad at him because I knew why he was calling. He said, yeah, I heard you called the FBI with a tip. And I said, I did. And he was laughing. And he said, my father-in-law is such a nice man. And I said, yeah, you know what? I don't know. And I don't care. But do you understand how you look shady as fuck right now? And he said, I understand how it looks. I understand how it looks really weird. And they're probably going to take the case away from me now. And I said, you know what? Good. You don't need it. You don't deserve it. You're too close, whether you knew it or not. And he said, I have never heard that story. My father-in-law never told me that story that his son told you. And I've heard stories about his son. And I said, yeah, I thought he was nuts when he called me too, but I don't think he's nuts anymore. And why they're not speaking is between them. That's a family issue.
Right. And the thing to remember, and anytime somebody like this guy, calls you and gives you this tip, maybe he is a little nuts. That might be adding to the problem. That if maybe he is a little off, but he knows the truth. And it's easier for people not to believe him because maybe he's a little off.
The thing is, he's not off. He's a successful businessman. He was married. He said part of the reason he and his father had a split was that he divorced his first wife and he wanted to give her a house that his mother and father had given him. And his father said, no, kick him out in the street.
Well, this part of the story I didn't know.
Yeah, that's part of the background. I don't want to air their dirty laundry because that's between them. But this man is married again. He has, children. He has a successful business. He's not crazy. We all have personality quirks. And when someone comes to you with a big piece of information that sounds so explosive, you want to vet them. And I vetted him to the best of my ability. That's not my job. This is a piece of information that comes to a woman who hosts a podcast through social media. So what I can tell you is that I have spoken to him twice since then. And he said that the FBI came to see him and he told them every single thing that he knew and that they should speak to his father, and they said they would. I have no idea if that ever happened. And now the Kentucky State Police came to him. And I have to tell you, I have more faith in the Kentucky State Police than the FBI. This man said he told the Kentucky State Police the same thing. He said, I have nothing to hide. My story is always going to be the same. And they told me they would speak to my father also. So I have no idea if this man was ever questioned by the FBI and by the Kentucky State Police. But I can tell you that now his son's statement is with both agencies. And hopefully it won't just fall between the cracks. And while I wouldn't want anything detrimental to fall on the head of this officer who had the cold case, I don't care that it was taken away from him. If he has a family member who may be implicated in this case, even if it's just as a witness, not as an accessory to the crime, he needs to not be handling the case. It needed to be taken away from him. So apparently it has been. I don't know. But I can tell you when he called me at the beginning of October, he said, well, we're doing another dig this coming week with cadaver dogs. And I stopped him and I said, are cadaver dogs going to find shit 40 years later? And he said, They have cadaver dogs that actually specialized cadaver dogs that sniff around Civil War graveyards. Okay, so what you're telling me is 200-year-old graves. There are dogs, human remain detection dogs that can, find. I don't know that to be true. It might be, and God bless them if it is. But I feel that cadaver dogs and forensic students are wasting their time digging around an area of Kincaid Lake Park, which, by the way, 38 years of a map that Donald Leroy Evans drew saying this is where he buried Randy in a very shallow grave. 38 years later, a park ranger says, oh, you know what? I think it's upside down.
Oh, God.
So he turns the map the other way and says, we've been looking in the wrong place for 38 years. We need to look here. So now the students from the university in Maryland and the dogs from Louisville and Lexington are looking in the completely opposite part of the park for someone who was never there. In my opinion. It's just really my opinion at this point. But all I can tell you is I can't believe what happened. I can't believe what was told to me. I mean, I believe it, but I'm still not sure I believe it. I'm not sure I believe it happened is what I'm trying to say. Is that it's, again, I believe in a group. I believe it takes a village to do almost anything positive. There are many times I wish I could do everything alone, and I'm really bad at that. And sometimes I need to ask for help, and I'm even worse at that. But when you hear about podcasts like the Murder Squad solving a 40-year-old case with DNA, no, they didn't. They didn't solve anything. What they did was ask their listeners to submit their DNA through public databases, and that's what happened. One of their listeners did her DNA test and submitted it to a public database, and they found a relative in Colorado of hers who had, raped and murdered a woman 40 years ago. So we don't solve anything in podcasts. I mean, I don't care how much you love Payne Lindsay. He didn't solve the Tara Grinstead murder. He did a podcast, and the police officers were already looking at the people that he implicated. He shone a large light on it, and that's great. And Payne Lindsay would never say he solved anything, I hope. You don't solve anything by hosting a podcast. You're talking behind a microphone and hoping people are listening. And I hope someone within the sound of my voice who might still be around in Northern Kentucky, who might know something, even if it's small. The tips over the years have dried up, and they have reopened the case and re-examined it. And I understand why they gave it to this particular officer, the most recent cold case detective, because he's young and it's fresh eyes. It was a smart thing to do if potentially his father-in-law didn't know what really happened. It would have been a great thing if that weren't a connection. But if you know anything about what happened to Randy Sellers on August 16th of 1980, when he left the Kenton County Fair, I'm begging you to contact the Kentucky State Police. And they have an anonymous tip line at 1-800-222-5555. We'll put that in the show notes. I will scream it to the top of the mountains. And more cowbell.
And remember, you can also call our tip line at 832-Tip-Ster. That's 832-847-7837. You can also send an email to jttipsters@gmail.com. And if you'd like to become a supporter of the podcast, go to patreon.com/justthetipsters.